Depression doesn't exist. It's what Andrew Tate says. Piers Morgan disagrees. I think neither of them fully understand it. And let's look at this together.
No problem. But I think
Let
we
me ask
actually
you about what do you believe about depression? Do you believe depression is a real thing?
I believe that feeling depressed is real. I don't believe depression as a clinical disease is real, no.
Really?
Correct.
You don't believe people can be clinically depressed?
I think PTSD is very real. Unfortunately, I have some friends who suffer from that. I know that feeling depressed is real. I believe that the number one power you have against these things are trying to take control of your own mind and affecting your own life. I believe that it's not healthy to hand over all your power and believe that depression is an outside disease that you can't affect. I know that when I've had difficult periods in my life, and also many of my friends, like I've said, suffer from PTSD and been through terrible things. I've lived a very difficult life, and I know people who have, that the things that made them feel better is when they woke up and said, you know what, I'm not going to allow this to damage me anymore. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to get up and I'm going to fight this as hard as I can.
Right, and by the way, on that, I agree.
So we agree.
Right? My favorite speech is the Rocky Balboa one.
Okay, so then we agree. No, we didn't.
Here's where we don't agree.
Piers.
You don't, no, hang on. You got to let me interject when I don't agree with you, right? Where I don't agree with you is that there's no such thing as clinical depression. There absolutely is.
Well,
it's a proven scientific medical reality. There's a different argument.
Yeah, this one drives me bananas for a couple of reasons. First, anybody that says this is a proven scientific reality, that's just a huge, you're putting a huge sign over your head saying, I don't understand science at all. And nothing is proven scientifically. And I'm speaking as someone who's in their last year of a PhD program in theoretical physics, all right? So, I'm literally a published scientist. It doesn't make sense to say stuff is proven scientifically. It's absurd. And then it's also this issue, the main issue I see with this depression topic is I actually don't see the benefit of having this diagnosis of depression like this, right? So in some sense, obviously it's true. Obviously there's this descriptive statement of what is depression. And then, so if you look at the DSM and how it's categorized, it says, okay, if you meet 5 of the 8 of these different behaviors, and it gives 8 behaviors that everybody can relate to in some sense, right? So then it's, okay, so yeah, depression is real, but then it's kind of that's not actually what's being talked about here. And they're talking about 2 different things, right? Because it's okay, is that diagnosis real? But then what they're fighting back against, and I think what Piers is trying to say is scientifically proven, is that there's a biological origin to this. And what that means is that it's something okay, if you get diagnosed with depression, then it's kind of here's this stamp on you that says, well, you're fucked, better luck in your next life, And I just think that is an absolutely dogshit way to view really any mental health disorder, so to speak. And I hate the word disorder because disorder seems to suggest that there's something wrong with you. And it's, okay, you just, there's a manufacturer's defect, when God made you and you came out of the womb, there's a slight defect here, and now you have this thing called depression, and, yeah, good luck, sorry, man, but, it's the best that we can do. I just don't accept this. I think it's absolutely not only not scientifically valid to view it that way, because, the effect of our neurochemistry on the way that we feel and our emotions and everything is not well understood. It's definitely not scientifically proven in any rigorous sense. And it's just, so there's that element to it. But then also there's this element, and I've noticed this from talking to people, that if they get a diagnosis like this, then they just accept that, okay, well, something's just wrong with me, right? That's just how it is. I'm broken somehow, and that's, I just got to live with that. And it's is that really the mindset that we want to give people? It's, that's the exact opposite of the mindset that we want to tell people. And yeah, I just don't actually understand this push to try to say, hey, we figured it out, and it's some chemical imbalance in your brain, and you're just, for whatever reason, you're deficient in this, and that's that. And then it's even if that is true, and you are deficient in that, what does that even mean? Does that actually say, oh, this is biologically rooted, right? It just says, oh, for whatever reason, if you look at standard levels of people that have, serotonin in their brain, yours are lower. But then it's okay, well, do you think that environmental aspects can cause that, right? What if I go to an amusement park, right? And I spend a day at the amusement park, and then I spend another day just locked in the closet staring at the wall. Do you think there's going to be a difference in serotonin between those two, right? And then are you going to say oh, well, that's a biological origin. It's not environmental, or it's not, the way that you're relating to things. I don't know. I just, clearly I get kind of passionate about this, but I think the discussion around this stuff is absolute dog shit.
Argument about have we gone a bit too soft, right, in schools and all the rest of it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I think some people moan and whine too much about their lot in life? Definitely.
Okay.
Are we a victimhood society? 100%.
Okay.
Is there such a thing as clinical depression? Absolutely.
And
my argument is that if you actually bracket everybody who's not clinically depressed and doesn't have the genuine medical condition, then actually if millions of people are deemed to have depression, the ones who really need the help don't get it. Well, that's my point.
Well, that I would agree with. You're right. I think it's certainly an overused term.
But you don't accept there is such a thing as clinical depression.
No, I don't.
And that to me is a damaging view.
Okay. Well, let me explain why. If someone comes to me and says, I'm clinically depressed or I feel very, very sad, I would say the first thing you need to do is stop accepting the identity of a clinically depressed person. Stop accepting you have no control over this. And what you need to do is stop identifying that way, and let's work together to try and fight against it.
There isn't an eminent doctor in the world who would tell you there is no such thing as clinical depression. Who would not tell you that some people is simply beyond their control.
I think Johan Hari wrote a book saying...
Well, the problem is you guys aren't talking about the same thing. This is the most frustrating part, because obviously, like, I think if you were asked to define what is clinical depression right now, you two would have radically different ideas, right? Like, in some sense, it's absurd if someone would say, no, there's no such thing as clinical depression. Because if you look at what does it mean to be clinically depressed, it means that you satisfy, 5 of the 8 different characteristics in the DSM-5. And obviously people satisfy that, right? But then it's the mechanism for why people feel that way is what Andrew Tate is disagreeing with. And then I think Piers Morgan might even think that the mechanism for why people are depressed is rock solid, but then it's definitely not. And no scientist would say that it is. Like, these things are so complicated, right? To try to say and pin down exactly like, oh, the reason you have this feeling right now in your life is because, this exact combination of chemicals in your brain. And then, I've even heard, and don't quote me on this one, but I've even heard that there's recent studies suggesting that serotonin isn't even linked to, it's questionable whether or not serotonin itself is linked to depression. So it's like, even if we knew, even the idea that depression is a lack of serotonin is questionable. That's not even rock solid. Right? And then to ask, okay, well, if these neurotransmitters do affect your state of mind, we certainly don't know how, and then is that biologically rooted? Is it some birth defect? Is it some kind of, environmental factor? Whatever. Like, this stuff is not known at all.
Exactly that, my friend.
He's not an eminent doctor.
No, but
he's a journalist.
I said depression wasn't real long ago and was attacked for it. Then Johan Hari wrote a book, which
What's
actually...
What's it got to do with Johan Hari?
Because he wrote a book proving me right. Most people...
Johan Hari's a journalist.
Sure. And my point is that a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, citing a journalist for this is, that was not a smart move. Like, I don't know. Like, oh yeah, this random guy over there, agrees with me, so therefore, that strengthens my claim that I'm making. That's not a good take at all. But...
A lot of people who are clinically depressed are suffering with something in their life, and if you fix the problem in their life, perhaps they won't feel depressed anymore. That's not a disease.
Yeah, but Andrew...
That's situational.
Andrew, you're simply wrong.
If that's what you believe, Piers,
it's what I believe.
I don't believe in things that take power away.
There is not an eminent doctor in the world
Piers
that would agree with you.
Piers,
it's not true. Like, I actually don't think there's a single doctor that would say, oh, you're depressed. Okay, well, take this pill, and definitely don't go to psychotherapy and talk about it. Yeah, because that stuff doesn't work at all. And, talk therapy, that's a hoax. But what you really need is, throw in some Wellbutrin, and if that doesn't work, add Abilify. And there probably are some doctors like this, and I think those people are fucking criminals, but I don't know. I mean, Andrew Tate is basically saying that what would be advantageous is to tell people that are depressed, you can do something about this, right? And I think the reason why people like this, well, I'm just fucked, is because it's a counter to, oh, well, you can't shame me because I'm just born this way or something, And it's like, how about instead of making up some bullshit, like we know for a fact that you're born this way or not, and that, you're kind of like slapped with this label of fucked, how about we just stop people, like, let's stop normalizing people shaming people for things like depression. Like, like that stuff's absurd. And, you hear this a lot, some conservatives saying like, oh, just don't be lazy. As if that's somehow good advice. It's like, oh, I've been depressed for 4 years. I never thought about just not being lazy. Wow, thank you, man. Like that, wow, now I'm cured. Like, yeah, okay. People that are like that, how about we just stop normalizing that and make fun of people that say shit like that because it's fucking stupid. But you don't, let's try to claim that, oh, this person that's depressed, it's like, oh, well, you're just always that way forever. You're stamped with this diagnosis of depression and better luck next time. Like that's, I don't know how anybody thinks that that's a good thing to do. That's not positive at all. Yeah, like, and I'm speaking as someone, I was depressed for 5 years, right? So I get it. But I don't think the correct answer is to say, oh, well, you're just stamped with depression forever. And if someone did say that to me, well, I probably wouldn't have believed it. But then I feel like I actually would not have gotten over depression if I had believed that it was something that was out of my control, right? And it's like, well, the way that you can cure depression, in a lot of cases, is to go to therapy, right? And then it's like everybody has different answers. For some people, taking the SSRI works. Great, right? For a lot of people, it doesn't. So what do we do with them? And if we have this belief that it's just a biological, like, oh, it's just something messed up in your brain, and then, something like SSRIs are like 20% effective. So what about the 80%? What do we do? You say like, oh, we can't figure this out. And it's, like, I think a lot of people are depressed because it's like we're isolated. We live in this like bizarre world where instead of, talking to people and showing love and caring for people, we try to like hook them up to some machine and say, oh, your serotonin is like slightly out of whack and that's why you're depressed. And it's like, no, you're probably depressed because you're lonely and sad and you don't have anybody that cares about you and you don't know what you want to do with your life and you're confused. And instead of someone saying like, hey, like I care about you and, I care about you as a human, we have these like absurd metrics of, oh, well, your serotonin's like this and norepinephrine like that, dopamine this, whatever. And it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I just think this way of viewing mental health is just so bad.
Do you think you know more than doctors?
I can't become clinically depressed.
Why do you know?
Because I don't believe in it. I can't be haunted by a ghost if I don't believe in ghosts.
Well, that's like saying I'm never going to die because I don't believe in it. It's ridiculous.
Perhaps, but if it allows me to live a life where I feel happy and
But here's
content
where you
within myself.
this is that little area where you lose me.
No, I don't lose you.
You are because
Okay, yeah, Andrew Tate loses me on this one. Like I think that is a good analogy. But here's what he said: like, oh, you can't have this because it'd be like saying I can't die because I don't believe in death. And it's like, and maybe this is why people like this attitude because that kind of mentality I think is super toxic. To be like, oh, I can't suffer from depression. Like I'm tough, and then implicitly what you're saying is to someone that does is that they're not tough, and then maybe that's why people like this is because then it's kind of like like it kind of reminds me of the like gay debate, right? Like back in the day, there was this debate on whether being gay was environmental or biological, right? And it's one of these things that it's like I don't even think it fucking matters. Who cares, right? Like, does that actually change how you interact with someone? And if it does, you're a homophobe, right? Like, if it's like, oh, well, this person, he's gay, by some environmental factor, so fuck him. Like, you're a monster. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's what we should be attacking. Like, and same thing with this. If you're like, oh, well, you're depressed and sad and down and don't have a lot of energy, well, is that biological or environmental? And if someone says, and suppose it is environmental, and then you're like, well, you're a lazy bastard and you should get off your fucking ass, fatty. It's like, you're a monster, right? So we should stop normalizing that. But then if there's different pathways besides the standard pathway of medicine and getting in the whole pharmaceutical industry that actually seems to help people, why should we be against that? We should be championing this and saying, hey, like depression is a massive problem in our country, and here's some things that have worked for people, right? Like we don't have to gatekeep this behind, like certain number of psychiatrists that study this, And I'm not saying don't listen to them. We should listen to them, but it's not like they're the final verdict on what is true and not about things like depression.
Piers,
somebody with your following says
the thousands of people who have emailed me saying my doctor told me I was clinically depressed and it's a disease that I have got in my brain and I can't be fixed. And I started listening to you and I realized that that's not the case and I can fix my own life and you're the only person who has ever helped me.
Oh, Andrew.
Thousands of people have emailed me that exact email.
If you think you are single-handedly curing people of clinical depression, you are living in cloud cuckoo land.
I am.
Like, why are you criticizing that? Isn't that great? Isn't it great that people have listened to what Andrew Tate said and gotten out of depression? Like, how is that a bad thing? Like, how are we criticizing that? I don't know. I just don't understand this. Like, what is the point of that? It's like, no, like, they shouldn't listen to you. They should be still depressed, you know? Like, fuck you, you know? Like, I don't know. It's just a insane way to view the world. I just don't get this at all. Like, why would you criticize someone that other people have found helpful? You know? Like, this reminds me of the whole Jordan Peterson thing, too. I don't know. It just makes no sense to me.
I'm reading the emails of people who I have cured of clinical depression.
You're reading emails from people who have believed you when you say there isn't such a thing, and they've probably never been diagnosed clinically depressed. They just want to go along with what Andrew Tate says.
I don't think so.
I think your view of that view is dangerous.
I respect that you think my view is dangerous, and I respect you have the right to view that, to think that. I think that clinical depression, I actually agree with you, is massively overdiagnosed. I've already said that PTSD is a very real thing. I've already said...
hang on.
Okay.
Again, you're misquoting me. I did not say clinical depression is massively overdiagnosed. I said that people who claim to be depressed but don't have clinical depression, I think that is massively overblown, right?
Well, then with Piers, it's like, what does it even mean to be massively overblown? Like, are you saying that the people don't really feel that way? Are you saying that... Like, and this is the weird part, and then maybe this is why people want this diagnosis. And it's kind of like, you know, whether someone has a diagnosis or not, does that actually matter? Like, do you treat somebody differently because, you know, oh, some doctor that has an MD said you're clinically depressed? Like, does that somehow, like, how does that actually change how you view the person, right? Like, you can't just show the person love and care and support in either one of these cases. Like who fucking cares whether or not somebody says it? If someone is feeling upset and down and low in energy and unmotivated and doesn't know what to do in life and they're lost and confused and they're not getting joy out of things that they do, like, okay, suppose they even go to a doctor and they don't get clinically depressed. Like, what do you say to them then? You're going to say, like, you know, well, you know, like, turns out you're not depressed. You're just a fucking loser then. Like, like maybe this is why people like the belief, you know, and the problem is really people that think this way. Which is kind of what I'm saying. We should fix the people that think that way. But this new belief is absurd, too.
Right? In other words, there are a lot of people who just have a bad day and declare, I've got depression.
Yeah.
And I say, well, have you been to a doctor? Have you been clinically diagnosed? If you have, and you have clinical depression, that's one thing. But if you haven't, we could probably work on some mental strength and resilience skills with you.
But even if you are clinically diagnosed, you can still work on those things, right? Like this is the problem I have with these diagnoses and stuff, you know? It's like, if you were diagnosed with cancer, you wouldn't say like, all right, you know, tough shit. You would say like, okay, let's come up with a regimen to fix this. If you were diagnosed with diabetes, you should take your life into your own hands somehow. You got to change your diet, maybe get on insulin. You don't just say like, oh yeah, you know, I have diabetes. Like, oh, tough shit. I'm just going to sit here and die. It's like, no, you say like, okay, let's help you. We got to make some modifications to try to get you to a life that you feel, you know, fulfilled about and satisfied with.
But a clinically depressed person has an absolutely proven medical condition that is beyond their control.
That's just not true. Like you can't prove these things. This is absurd. It's absolutely absurd to say stuff like that.
Not according to me and many others, my friend.
Well, look, what do you know about it, honestly?
I know.
I'm going to be honest, I don't even think doctors agree that it's clinically proven that it's something that's completely out of an individual's control. Like, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but I really don't, like, I don't think that that's a widespread take in the medical world either. Like, I don't think, I don't know. As a scientist, scientists don't think like that, right? Is there a correlation with it? Sure. Are there actual biological markers when people are depressed? Sure. Do SSRIs help sometimes? Sure. Does that mean it's 100% out of your control and there's nothing you can do about it? No. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I know.
You're not a doctor, are you? Not trained, are you?
I'm not a doctor.
You're not a psychiatrist. You're none of those things.
Sure.
You're a guy on the make. He's done very well for himself, spouting stuff off, much of which I agree with, as you've seen in the interview, but some of which is ludicrous, and that's one of them.
It's not ludicrous.
It is.
It's not.
If you said to me, we're in a victimhood society has got to stop, I'm with you.
Okay.
But the moment you try and deny clinical depression...
I believe feeling depressed is real. I do not believe it's a disease that you catch from the sky and you cannot affect. I believe that no matter what happens, I believe you have control of your own mind and you can fight against it. I'm
going to push back a bit on the control. You don't have complete control, right? But then there are things that you can do. And yeah, I don't know. I just think giving somebody some kind of stamp that says, you know, like, tough shit, you're depressed and there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to feel miserable the rest of your life. Like, you know, take care. Hope you feel better. And hey, this guy over there is saying, oh, well, if you do these things, maybe it helps your depression. Don't listen to him because he's a fraud. I don't know. That just sounds cruel to me.
I believe if you change your circumstances in your life, you may feel different. I'll give you a quick example. I had a guy who emailed me saying he was clinically depressed and he was going to kill himself. I obviously am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a doctor. I told him, because I replied to my emails. I said, have you been to a psychiatrist? He said, yes, I'm clinically depressed. I've been on these pills, this amount of time. I'm on antidepressants. It doesn't work. I said, I don't know what to say to you besides this. And he said he lost his girlfriend. That's why I became clinically depressed. I said, listen, go to the gym, get a six-pack first. Once you've got a six-pack, email me again. If you still feel like killing yourself, I don't know what else to say to you. But I'd say, strong body is a strong mind, go train. He went, he started sending me progress pictures, emailing me him getting in better shape, and eventually got a six-pack. He's now a professional bodybuilder. And he said, I can't believe I was considering that. I feel so much better, etc. The doctor was telling him he was clinically depressed and couldn't cure it. He started taking control of his own life, and now he felt better. Now, I'm not saying it's the case for everybody.
No.
I'm just saying.
Here's my question, though. Have you seen the guy's medical records?
Of course not. I just told you the
So
story.
you're just taking his word for it?
Oh,
Of course. Like, does that actually invalidate it? I don't know, man. Like I wouldn't recommend the same path that Andrew Tate does. Like, it's not personally what I feel like helped me. But then, if it did help Andrew Tate and it helped other people, why should we not, like, spread that message and say, hey, well, you know, here's some things that you can do to help with that, right? Like, I personally would recommend someone goes, you know, to talk therapy, psychoanalysis, like, work through your emotions and take that route. This person thinks, you know, I guess he says strong body, strong mind. And for him, it seems to work, you know? And if other people, it seems to help them too. Does it really matter that that message didn't come from a doctor? Like, why are we being gatekeepy on this stuff? Like, I just don't understand it. Like, if somebody says something that helps someone, why be against that, you know? And, like, I don't want to come off like I'm a biggest fan of Andrew Tate, you know? Like, I'm probably going to, I plan to do future videos just talking about the red pill ideology altogether and a lot of problems I have with it. But this is not one of the problems. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with having this view.
I am taking the words of a man who emailed me with a bunch of medication in specific
So
doses.
you're denying proven science because one guy writes to you who you help and you've not seen any evidence he ever had clinical depression diagnosed.
I'm denying the idea that...
And on the back of it, you go on your rants in public to tens of millions of people denying something because this guy writes to you and says he had it and you cured him. And I think that's a dangerous mindset, Andrew.
That's fine.
And that's where you don't have a responsible view of your influence over
Disagree.
people.
It's very responsible because I'm saving people's lives. I disagree that if you feel depressed, I disagree that you cannot affect it and change your life and take control and fix yourself and feel happier. I disagree with that.
Do you think
I refuse to accept that there are people out there who cannot become happy, contented individuals. I refuse to accept we live in a world where God has created people who, no matter how hard they work and how good their life becomes, can't be happy. I don't accept that. I accept that the universe is a very giving place and that God loves all of us. And if you try your best and you work hard, you can become a better person. And I also will argue with you, and I'll counter the point that you sitting here on your platform telling people they have clinical depression, there's nothing they can do about it, is far more dangerous.
That.
Okay, well then, if they have clinical depression...
Why do you misquote me?
No.
I don't think that's a misquote at all, right? I mean, that is basically what you're saying. You know, Andrew Tate worded this kind of weird and said, you're telling people that they have clinical depression and there's nothing they can do about it. And that's not exactly what he said. But what he would say is, if you have clinical depression, then it's out of your control.
No, because you're saying...
hate being misquoted.
No, you're saying if people have clinical depression...
I never said there's nothing to do about it. They go to a doctor and they get diagnosed and they get help.
Then I would argue the point that if
It's the
somebody...
complete opposite of what you just said I said.
I would argue the point that if somebody has depression of any kind, whether it's clinical, whether it exists or not, whether they feel depressed or not, whatever, that taking control of their life, taking personal responsibility and working hard is always going to be the positive, best thing they can possibly do for their life going forward.
Okay, that part I kind of want to fight back. You know, to say that it's, you know, this is the best thing that you can do. I don't think that that's good. And I think that that's equally as bad as what I was saying about the gatekeeping of the medical industry, right? Like, how about let's not try to say this is best, that's best, whatever. It's like, hey, here's different viewpoints that might help you to feel better, right? And so, you know, maybe that's what Piers is frustrated with, is that he's coming off kind of saying that. But then it's like, I even know people in my life that feel like they were depressed and then they got into working out and it made their life way better. And great, like, that's awesome, you know, like, isn't that good? But then I think it's wrong. And like, I would even fall into this because, you know, what cured my depression was going to therapy, right? And so I initially was kind of like, oh, well, therapy is what you need to do to cure this. And it took me a while to kind of change that view and say, you know, okay, well, it seems like certain people, when they do take medications, it does cure their depression. And that's great. other people, it seems like working out cures their depression. Right? For me, it was like therapy cured it. And I don't know. I think, how about someone who's depressed? We say, hey, this is what different people tried. You know, maybe do what you wish with that. Maybe try some combination or all or one or some of these and see if it works for you. Right? But let's not, you know, just silence certain views like this.
Positive is around them. So sitting here saying, I don't believe in clinical depression, you don't believe in depression. No, I don't. I believe that people can take control and fight against things. Right. I believe in personal sovereignty.
Right. Fine.
Good. So we agree.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Piers, you're on my side. You're afraid of being cancelled along with me.
As I said to you from the start,
that's all
I agree with a lot of what you say.
Completely. So
but I'm taking you to task over the stuff I don't agree with.
Sure.
And I'm just not sure you understand why it's wrong, which is in itself quite revealing. Let me talk to you about Alex.
Yeah, that's it. Just assert it's wrong. I don't know. I think I said enough about this, and yeah, we'll leave it there. All right.